Hello. Just finished my sets. Why you gotta be so? Okay, let's jump. Let's jump into our reading. Okay. Why you gotta be so rude? Don't you know I'm human too? So this is the charismatic. Charisma is a charisma is a presence that excites us. It comes from an inner quality, self-confidence, sexual energy, sense of purpose, contentment that most people lack and want. This quality radiates outward, permeating the gestures of charismatics, making them seem extraordinary and superior and making us imagine there is more to them than meets the eye. They are gods, saint stars. Charismatics can learn to heighten their charisma with a piercing gaze, fiery oratory, an air of mystery. They can seduce on a grand scale, learn to create the charismatic illusion by radiating intensity while remaining detached. I think I should take my vest off. It's so hot in here, you know. You know. Why you gotta be so rude? Charisma and seduction. Charisma is seduction on a mass level. Charismatics make crowds of people fall in love with them, then lead them along. The process of making them fall in love is simple and follows a path similar to that of a one-on-one seduction. Charismatics have certain qualities that are powerfully attractive and that make them stand out. This could be their self-belief, their boldness, their sense of serenity. They keep the source of these qualities mysterious. They do not explain where their confidence or contentment comes from, but it can be felt by everyone. It radiates outward without the appearance of conscious effort. The face of the charismatic is usually animated, full of energy, desire, alertness. The look of a lover, one that is instantly appealing, even vaguely sexual. We happily follow charismatics because we like to be led, particularly by people who promise adventure or prosperity. We lose ourselves in their cause, become emotionally attached to them, feel more alive by believing in them. We fall in love. Charisma plays on repressed sexuality, creates an erotic charge, yet the origins of the word lie not in sexuality but in religion, and religion remains deeply embedded in modern charisma. Thousands of years ago, people believed in gods and spirits, but few could ever say that they had witnessed a miracle, a physical demonstration of divine power. A man, however, who seemed possessed by a divine spirit, speaking in tongues, ecstatic raptures, the expression of intense visions, would stand out as one whom the gods had singled out. And this is and this man, a priest or a prophet, gained great power over others. What made the Hebrew believe in Moses, follow him out of Egypt, and remain loyal to him despite their endless wandering in the desert? The look in his eyes, his inspired and inspiring words, the face that literally glowed when he came down from Mount Sinai, all these things gave him the appearance of having direct communication with God and were the source of his authority. And these were what was meant by charisma, a Greek word referring to prophet and to Christ himself. In early Christianity, charisma was a gift or talent which was shaped by God's grace and revealing his presence. Most of the great religions were founded by a charismatic, a person who physically displayed the signs of God's favor. Over the years, the world became more irrational. Eventually, people came to hold power not by divine, but because they won votes or proved their competence. The great early 20th century German sociologist Max Weber, however, noticed that despite our supposed progress, there were more charismatics than ever. What characterized a modern charismatic, according to Weber, was the appearance of an extraordinary quality in their character, the equivalent of a sign of God's favor. How else to explain the power of a raspberry or a Lenin? More than anything, it was the force of their magnetic personalities that made these men stand out and was the source of their power. They did not speak of God, but of a great cause, vision of a future society. Their appeal was emotional. They seemed possessed, and their audiences reacted as euphorically as earlier audiences had to a prophet. When Lenin died in 1924, a cult formed around his memory, transforming the community's leader into a deity. Today, anyone who has presence, who attracts attention when he or she enters a room is said to possess charisma. But even these less exalted types reveal a trace of the qualities suggested by the word's original meaning. Their charisma is mysterious and inexplicable, never obvious. They have an unusual confidence. They have a gift, often a smoothness with language that makes them stand out from the crowd. They express a vision. We may not realize it, but in their presence we have a kind of religious experience. We believe in these people without having any rational evidence for doing so. When trying to concoct an effect of charisma, never forget the religious source of its power. You must read an inward quality that has a saintly or spiritual edge to it. Your eyes must glow with the fire of a prophet. Your charisma must seem natural, as if it came from something mysteriously beyond your control, a gift of the gods in a rational, disenchanted world. People crave a religious experience, particularly on a group level. Any sign of charisma plays to this desire to believe in something, and there is nothing more seductive than giving people something to believe in and follow. Charisma must seem mystical, but that does not mean you cannot learn certain tricks that will enhance the charisma you already possess or will give you the outward appearance of it. The following are basic qualities that will help create the illusion of charisma. Purpose. If people believe you have a plan, that you know where you are going, they will follow you instinctively. The direction does not matter. Pick a cause, an ideal, a vision, and so that you will not sway from your goal. People will imagine that your confidence comes from something real, just as the ancient Hebrews believed Moses was in communication with God simply because he saw the outward signs. Purposefulness is doubly charismatic in times of trouble, since most people hesitate before taking bold actions, even when action is what is required. Single-minded self-assurance will make you the focus of attention. People will believe in you through the simple force of your character. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt came to power amidst the Depression, much of the public had little faith he could turn things around, but in his first few months in office, he displayed such confidence, such decisiveness and clarity in dealing with the country's many problems that the public began to see him as their savior, someone with intense charisma. Intense charisma. Mystery. Mystery lies at charisma's heart. But it is a particular kind of mystery, a mystery expressed by contradiction. The charismatic may be both proletarian and aristocratic, Mao Zedong, but cruel and kind, Peter the Great, both excitable and easily detached, Charles de Gaulle, both intimate and distant, Sigmund Freud. Since most people are predictable, the effect of this contradiction is devastatingly charismatic. They make you hard to fathom, and richness to your character make people talk about you. It is often better to reveal your contradictions slowly and subtly. If you throw them out on top of the other, people may think you have an erratic personality, so your mysteriousness gradually and word will spread. You must also keep people at arm's length to keep them from figuring you out. Another aspect of mystery is a hint of the uncanny. The appearance of prophet or psychic gifts will add to your aura, predict things authoritatively, and people will often imagine that what you have said has come true. Saintliness. Most of us must compromise constantly to survive. Saints do not. They must live out their ideals without caring about the consequences. The saintly effect bestows charisma. Saintliness goes far beyond religion. Politicians as desperate as George Washington and Lenin won saintly reputation by living simply despite their power, by matching their political values to their personal lives. Both men were virtually deified after they died. Albert Einstein too had a saintly aura, childlike, unwilling to compromise, lost in his own world. The key is that you must already have some deeply held values. That part cannot be faked, at least not without risking accusations of charlatanry that will destroy your charisma in the long run. The next step is to show as simply and subtly as possible that you live what you believe. Having the appearance of being mild and unassuming can eventually turn into charisma as long as you seem completely comfortable with it. The source of Harry Truman's charisma and even of Abraham Lincoln's was to appear to be an everyman. Eloquence. A charismatic relies on the power of words. The reason is simple. Words are the quickest way to create emotional disturbance. They can uplift, elevate, store anger without referring to anything real. During the Spanish Civil War, Dolores Gomez Ibarruri, known as the La Pasionari, gave communist speeches that were so emotionally powerful as to determine several key moments in the war. To bring off this kind of eloquence, it helps if the speaker is as emotional as caught in words as the audience is. Yet eloquence can be learned. The device La Pasionera used catchwords, slogans, idiomatic repetitions, phrases for the audience to repeat can easily be acquired. Whereas Roosevelt, a calm patrician type, was able to make himself a dynamic speaker both through his style of delivery, which was slow and hypnotic, and through his brilliant use of imaginary alteration and biblical rhetoric. The crowd at his rallies were often moved to tears. The slow, authoritative style is often more effective than passion in the long run, but it is more thoroughly spellbinding and less tiring. Theatricality. A charismatic is larger than life, has extra presence. Actors have studied this kind of presence for centuries. They know how to stand out on a crowd stage and command attention. Surprisingly, it is not the actor who screams the loudest or gestures the most widely who works this magic best, but the actor who stays calm, radiating self-assurance. The effect is ruined by trying too hard. It is essential to be self-aware, to have the ability to see yourself as others sees you. De Gaulle understood this self-awareness was key to his charisma in the most turbulent circumstances. The Nazi occupation of France, the national reconstruction after World War II, an army rebellion in Algeria, he remained an Olympian composer that played beautifully against the hysteria of his colleagues. When he spoke, no one could take their eyes off him. Once you know how to command attention this way, heightens the effect by appearing in ceremonial and ritual events that are full of exciting imagery, making you look regal and godlike. Flamboyancy has nothing to do with charisma, it attracts the wrong kind of attention. Uninhibitedness. Most people are repressed and have little access to their unconscious, a problem that creates opportunity for the charismatic, who can become a kind of screen on which others project their secret fantasies and longings. You will first have to show that you are less inhibited than your audience, that you radiate a dangerous sexuality, have no fear of death, are delightfully spontaneous. Even a hint of these qualities will make people think you more powerful than you are. In the 1850s, a bohemian American actress, Rebecca Isaac Mencken, took the world by storm through her unbridled sexual energy and her fearlessness. She would appear on stage half-naked, performing death and defying acts. Few women could dare such a thing, and Victorian period and a rather mediocre actress become a figure of cult-like adoration. An extension of your being uninhibited is a dreamlike quality in your work and character that reveals your openness to your unconscious. It was the possession of this quality that transformed artists like Wagner and Picasso into charismatic idols. Its cousin is a fluidity of body and spirit, while the repressed are rigid. Charismatics have an ease and adaptability that show their openness to experience. Fervency. You need to believe in something. You need to believe in something and to believe in it strongly enough for it to animate all your gestures and make your eyes light up. This cannot be fake, but it's inevitably lied to the public. What distinguishes charismatic is that they believe their own lies. This makes them that much more believable. A prerequisite for a fiery belief is some great cause to rally around. A crusade became the rallying point for people's discontent, and so that you share none of the doubts and plague normal humans. In 1490, the Florente Girolamo Savonarola revealed the immorality of the Pope and the Catholic Church, claiming to be divinely inspired. He became so animated during his sermons that hysteria would sweep the crowd. Savonarola developed such a following that he briefly took over the city until the Pope had him captured and burned at the stake. People believed in him because of the depth of his conviction. His example has more relevance today than ever. People are more and more isolated and long for communal experience. Let your own fervent and contagious faith in virtually anything give them something to believe in. Vulnerability. Charismatics display a need for love and affection. They are open to their audiences and in fact feed off its energy. The audience in turn is electrified by charismatic, the current increasing as it passes back and forth. This vulnerable side to charisma softens the self-confident side, which can seem fantastical and frightening. Since charisma involves a feeling akin to love, you in turn must reveal your love for your followers. This was a key component to the charisma that Marilyn Monroe radiated on camera. I knew I belonged to the public, she wrote in her diary, and to the world, not because I was talented or even beautiful, but because I had never belonged to anything or anyone else. The public was the only family, if only family, the only Prince Charming, and the only home I had ever dreamed of. In front of a camera, Monroe suddenly came to life, flirting with and exciting her unsaid public. If the audience does not sense this quality in you, they will turn away from you. On the other hand, you must never seem manipulative or needy. Imagine your public as a single person whom you are trying to seduce. Nothing is more seductive to people than the feeling that they are desired. Adventurousness. Charismatics are unconventional. They have an air of adventure and risk that attracts to the board. Be brazen and courageous in your actions. Be seen taking risks for the good of others. Napoleon made sure his soldiers saw him as at the cannon in battle. Lenin walked openly on the streets despite the death threats he had received. Charismatics thrive in troubled waters. A crisis situation allows them to form their daring, which enhances their aura. John F. Kennedy came to life in dealing with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Charles de Gaulle, when he confronted rebellion in Algeria, they needed these problems to seem charismatic, and in fact, some have even accused them of stirring up situations. Kennedy, through his bankmanship styles of diplomacy, for instance, that played to their love of adventure, so heroism to give yourself a charisma that will last you a lifetime. Conversely, the slightest sign of cowardice or timidity will ruin whatever charisma you had. Magnetism. If any physical attribute is crucial in seduction, it is the eyes. They reveal excitement, tension, detachment without a word being spoken. In direct communication is critical in seduction and also in charisma. The demeanor of charismatics may be poised and calm, but their eyes are magnetic. They have a piercing gaze that disturbs their targets. Emotion exerting force without words or action. Fidel Castro's aggressive gaze can reduce his opponents to silence. When Benito Mussolini was challenged, he would roll his eyes, showing the whites in a way that frightened people. President Kusnasoro Sukarno of Indonesia had a gaze that seemed as if it could have read through. Roosevelt could dilate his pupils at will, making him stare both hypnotizing and intimidating. The eyes of the charismatic never show fear or nerves. All of these skills are acquirable. Napoleon spent hours in front of a mirror modeling his gaze on that of a great contemporary actor, Talma. The key is self-control. The look does not necessarily have to be aggressive. It can also show contentment. Remember, your eyes can emanate charisma, but they can also give away as a figure. Do not leave such an important attribute to chance. Practice the effect you desire. Genuine charisma. Genuine charisma thus means the ability to intentionally generate and externally express extreme excitement and ability, which makes one the object of intense attention and unreflective imitation by others. Laha Greenfield. Charismatic types. Historical examples. The miraculous prophet. In the year 1425, Joan of Arc, a peasant girl from the French village of Dombray, had her first vision. I was in my 13 years when God sent a voice to guide me. The voice was that of Saint Michael, and he came with a message from God. John had been chosen to rid France of the English invaders who now ruled most of the country and of the resulting chaos and war. She was also to restore the French crown to the prince, the Dauphin, later Charles VII, who was its rightful heir. Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret also spoke to John. Her visions were extraordinarily vivid. She saw Saint Michael, touched him, smelled him. At first, John told no one what she had seen, for all anyone knew. She was a quiet farm girl, but the visions became even more intense, and so in 1429 she left Domrey, determined to realize the mission for which God had chosen her. Her goal was to meet Charles in the town of Chinon, where he had established his court in exile. The obstacles were enormous. Sinan was far, the journey was dangerous. The Charles, even if she reached him, was a lazy and cowardly young man who was unlikely to crusade against the English. Undaunted, she moved from village to village, explaining her mission to soldiers and asking them to escort her to Sinan. Young girls with religious reasons were a dozen at the time. Dime a dozen at the time, and there was nothing in Joan's appearance to inspire arrogance. One soldier, however, Jean de Metz, was intrigued with her, was fascinated with him, was the detail of her visions. He would liberate the besieged town of Orleans, have the king crowned at the cathedral in Reims, lead the army to Paris. She knew how she would be wounded, and where. The words she attributed to Saint Michael were quite unlike the language of a farm girl, and she was so calmly confident. She glowed with confidence. The Metz fell under her spell. He swore allegiance and set out with her for Sinan. Soon others offered resistance too, and word reached Charles of the strange young girl on her way to meet him. On the 350-mile road to Sinan, accompanied only by a handful of soldiers, through a land infested with warring bands, John showed neither fear nor hesitation. The journey took several months. When she finally arrived, the Dauphin decided to meet the girl who had promised to restore him to his throne. Despite the advice of his counselors, but he was bored and wanted amusement and decided to play a trick on her. She was to meet him in a hall packed with courtiers to test her prophetic powers. He disguised himself as one of these men and dressed another man as the prince. Yet when Joan arrived, to the amazement of the crowd, she walked straight up to the child and quoted, "The King of Heaven sends me to you with the message that you shall be the lieutenant of the King of Heaven, who is the King of France." In the talk that followed, Joan seemed to echo Charles' most private thoughts, while once again recounting in extraordinary details the feats she would accomplish. Days later, this incident, indecisive, flightly man declared himself convinced and gave her his blessing to lead a French army against the English. But miracles and saintliness aside, Joan of Arc had certain basic qualities that made her exceptional. Her visions were intense. He could describe them in such details that they had to be real. Details have that effect. They lend a sense of reality to even the most preposterous statements. Furthermore, in a time of great disorder, she was supremely focused, as if her strength came from somewhere unworldly. She spoke with authority, and she predicted things people wanted. The English would be defeated, prosperity would return. She also had a peasant's earthly common sense. She had surely heard description of Charles on the road to clean Sinan once at court. She could have sensed the trick he was playing on her, and could have confidently picked out his pampered face in the crowd. The following year, her wishes abandoned her and her confidence as well. She made many mistakes leading to her capture by the English. She was indeed human. We may no longer believe in miracles, but anything that hints at strange, unworldly, even supernatural powers will create charisma. The psychology is the same. You have visions of the future and of the wondrous things you can accomplish. Describe these things in great details with an air of authority, and certainly you stand out. And if your prophecy of prosperity say it's just what people want to hear, and they are likely to fall under your spell, and to see later, even as a confirmation of your predictions, exhibit remarkable confidence, and people will think your confidence comes from real knowledge. You will create a self-fulfilling prophecy. People's belief in you will translate into action that help realize your visions. Any hint of success will make them see miracles, uncanny powers, the glow of charisma. The authentic animal. One day in 1905, the St. Petersburg salon of countless dignitaries was unusually full. Politicians, society ladies, and courtiers had all arrived early to await the remarkable guest of honor, Grigory Alphonse Rasputin, a 40-year-old Serbian monk who had made a name for himself throughout Russia as a healer, perhaps a saint. When Rasputin arrived, few could disguise their disappointment. His face was ugly, his hair was stringy, he was gangly and awkward. They wondered why they had come. But the Rasputin approached them one by one, wrapping his big hands around their fingers and gazing deep into their eyes. At first his gaze was unsettling as he looked them up and down. He seemed to be probing and judging them, yet suddenly his expression would change, and kindness, joy, and understanding would radiate from his face. Several of the ladies he actually hugged in most effusive manner. This startling contrast had found profound effect. The mood in the saloon was the mood in the saloon soon changed from disappointment to excitement. Rasputin's voice was so calm and deep, his language was coarse, yet the ideas requests were delightfully simple and had the ring of great spiritual truth. Then, just as the guests were beginning to relax with this dirty-looking present, his mood suddenly changed to anger. "I know you. I can reach your souls. You are all too pampered. These fine clothes and arts of yours are useless and pernicious. Men must learn to humble them. Men must humble themselves. You must be simple, far, far simpler. Only then will God come nearer to you." The monk's face grew animated. His pupils expanded. He looked completely different. How impressive that angry look was, recalling Jesus throwing the money lenders from the temple. Now Rasputin claimed down returned to be gracious, but the guest already saw him as someone strange and remarkable. Next, in a performance he could soon repeat in salons throughout the city, he led the guests in a folk song as they sang, he began to dance a strange, uninhibited dance of his own design, and as he danced, he struggled the most attractive women there. And with his eyes invited them to join them. The dance turned vaguely sexual as his partners fell under his spell. He whispered suggestive comments in their ears, yet none of them seemed to be offended. Over the next few months, women from every level of St. Petersburg society visited Rasputin in his apartment. He would talk to them of spiritual matters, but then, without warning, he would turn sexual, murmuring the cursed come alms. He would justify himself through spirits of dogma. How can you repeat if you have not sinned? Salvation only comes to those who go astray. One of the few who rejected his advice was asked by a friend. "How can you refuse anything to our sin? Does a sin need a sinful love?" She replied, her friend said, "He makes everything that comes near him holy. I have already belonged to him, and I am proud and happy to have done so. But you are married. What does your husband say?" He considers it a very great honor. If Rasputin desires a woman, we all think it a blessing and a distinction, our husbands as well as ourselves. Rasputin's spell soon extended over Caesar Nicholas and more privately over his wife, the Caesarian Alexandra, after he apparently healed their son from a life-threatening injury. Within a few years, he had become the most powerful man in Russia, with total sway over a royal couple. People are more complicated than the masks they wear in society. The man who seems so noble and gentle is probably disguising a dark side, which will often come out in strange ways if his nobility and refinement are in fact put on. Sooner or later, the truth will out, and his hypocrisy will disappoint and alienate. On the other hand, we are drawn to people who seem more comfortably human, who do not bother to disguise their contradiction. This was the source of Rasputin's charisma. A man so authentically himself, so devoid of self-consciousness or hypocrisy, was immensely appealing. His wickedness and sinfulness was so extreme that it made him seem larger than life. The result was a charismatic aura that was immediate and proverbial. It radiates from his eyes and from the touch of his hands. Most of us are a mix of the devil and the saint, noble and the ignoble, and we spend our lives trying to repress the dark side. Few of us can give free rein to both sides, or Rasputin did. But we can create charisma to a smaller degree by ridding ourselves of self-consciousness and of the discomfort most of us feel about our complicated natures. You cannot help being the way you are. So be genuine. This is what attracts us to animals. Beautiful and cruel, they have no self-doubt. That quality is totally fascinating in humans. Or outwardly, people may condemn your dark side, but it is not virtue alone that creates charisma. Anything extraordinary will do. Do not apologize or go halfway. The more unbridled you seem, the more magnetic the effect. The demonic performer. Throughout his childhood, Elvis Presley was thought a strange boy who kept pretty much to himself. In high school in Memphis, Tennessee, he attracted attention with his palm-toured hair and sideburns, his pink and black clothing, but people who tried to talk to him found nothing there. He was either terribly bland or hopelessly shy at the high school prom. He was the only boy who didn't dance. He seemed lost in a private world, in love with the guitar. He took everyone at the Alice Auditorium at the end of an evening of gospel music or wrestling. The Concussions manager would often find Elvis on stage, naming a performance and taking bows before an imaginary audience. Asked to leave, he would quietly walk away. He was a very polite young man. In 1953, just out of high school, Elvis recorded his first song in a local studio. The record was a test, a chance for him to hear his own voice. A year later, the owner of the studio, Sam Phillips, called him into calling him to record two blues songs with a couple of professional musicians. They worked for hours, but nothing seemed to click. Elvis was nervous and inhibited. Then, near the end of the evening, giddy with exhaustion, he suddenly let loose and started to jump around like a child in a moment of complete self-abandon. The other musicians joined in the song, getting wilder and wilder. Phillips isolated up. He had something here. A month later, Elvis gave his first public performance outdoors in a Memphis park. He was as nervous as he had been at the recording sessions and could only stutter when he had to speak. But once he broke into a song, the word came out. The crowd responded excitedly, rising to peaks at certain moments. Elvis couldn't figure out why. I went over to the manager after the song, he later said, and I asked him what was making the crowd go nuts. He told me, I'm not really sure, but I think that every time you wiggle your left leg, they start to scream. Whatever it is, just don't stop. A single Elvis recorded in 1954 became a hit. Soon he was in demand, going on stage filled him with anxiety and emotion, so much so that he became a different person as he possessed. I've talked to some singers and they get a little nervous, but they say their nerves kind of settle down after they got into it. Mine never do it. It's sort of this energy, something maybe like sex. Over the next few months, he discovered more gestures and sounds, stretching dance movements, a more tremulous voice that made the crowd go crazy, particularly teenage girls. Within a year, he had become the hottest musician in America. His concerts were exercises in mass hysteria. Mass hysteria. Elvis Presley had a dark side, a secret life. Some have attributed it to the death at birth of his twin brother. The dark side he deeply repressed as a young man. He includes all kinds of fantasies which he could only give in to when he was alone. Although his unconventional clothing may also have been a symptom of it. When he performed, though he was able to let these demons loose, they come out as a dangerous sexual power. Twitching androgynous, uninhibited, he was a man enacting strange fantasies before the public. The audience sensed this and was excited by it. It wasn't a flamboyant style and appearance that gave Elvis charisma, but rather the electrifying expression of his inner turmoil. A crowd or group of any sort has a unique energy just below the surface is desire or constant sexual excitement that has to be repressed because it is socially unacceptable. If you have the ability to arouse these desires, the crowd will see you as having charisma. The key is learning to access your own unconsciousness as Elvis did when he let go. You are full of an excitement that seems to come from some mysterious inner source. Your uninhibitedness will invite other people to open up, sparking a chain reaction. Their excitement in turn, will animate you still more. The fantasies you bring to the surface do not have to be sexual. Any social taboo, anything repressed and yearning for an outlet will suffice. Make this felt in your recordings, your artwork, your books. Social pressure keeps people so repressed that they will be attracted to your charisma before they have even met you in person. The Savior. In March of 1917, the Russian parliament forced the country's ruler Tsar Nicholas to abdicate and establish a provisional government. Russia was in ruins. Its participation in World War I had been a disaster. Famine was spreading widely. The west countryside was driven by looting and religious law. The soldiers were distorting from the army was en masse politically. The country was severely divided. The main fractions were the right, the Social Democrats, and the left-wing revolutionaries, and each of these groups was itself attracted by dissension. Into this chaos came the 47-year-old Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, a Marxist revolutionary, the leader of the Bolshevik Communist Party. He had suffered a 12-year exile in Europe until, recognizing the chaos, overcome Russia as the chance he had long been waiting for. He had hurried back home. Now he called for the country to end its participation in the war and for an immediate socialist revolution. In the first weeks after his arrival, nothing could have seemed more ridiculous. As a man, Lenin looked looked unimpressive. He had short and plain feature. He had also spent years of in Europe isolated from his people and immersed in reading and intellectual argument. Most important, his party was small, representing only a splinter group within the loosely organized left coalition. Few took him seriously as a national leader. Undaunted, Lenin went to work wherever he went. He repeated the same simple message, and the war established the rule of the proletariat, abolished private property, redistributed wealth, exhausted with the nation's endless political infighting and the complexity of his problems. People began to listen. Lenin was so determined, so confident, he never lost his cool. In the midst of a raucous debate, he would simply and logically debunk each one of his adversaries' points. Workers and soldiers soldiers were, in, were Workers and soldiers were impressed by his firmness. Once in the midst of a brewing riot, Lenin amazed his chauffeurs by jumping onto the running board of his car and directing the way through the crowd at considerable personal risk. Told that his ideas had nothing to do with reality, he would answer, "So much the worse for reality." Allied to Lenin's messianic confidence in his cause was his ability to organize. Exile in Europe, his party had become scattered and diminished. In keeping them together, he had developed immense practical skills in front of a large crowd. He was also a powerful orator. His speech at the first All-Russian Soviet Congress made a sensation, either revolution to a bourgeois government, he cried, but nothing in between, enough of this compromise in which he left us sharing at a time when other politicians were scrambling, desperate to adapt to their national crisis, and seemed weak in the process. Lenin was rock stable, his prestige soared, and as did the membership of the Bolshevik Party. Most astounding of all was Lenin's effect on workers, soldiers, and peasants. He would address these common people wherever he found them. In the street, or standing on a chair, his thumbs in his lapel, his speech, an odd mix of ideology, peasant aphorisms, and revolutionary slogans. They would listen in rapture. When Lenin died in 1924, 7 years after single-handedly opening the way to the October Revolution of 1917, which had swept him and the Bolsheviks into power, these same ordinary Russians went into mourning. They worshipped at his tomb, where his body was preserved on a view. They told stories about him, developing a body of Lenin folklore. Thousands of newborn girls were cherished Lenin spelled backwards. This cult of Lenin assumed religious proportions. There are all kinds of misconceptions about charisma, which paradoxically only add to its mistakes. Charisma has little to do with an exciting physical appearance or colorful personality. Qualities that elicit short-term interest, particularly in times of trouble. People are not looking for entertainment; they want security, a better quality of life, social cohesion. Believe it or not, a plain-looking man or a woman with a clear vision, a quality of single-mindedness, and practical skills can be devastatingly charismatic, provided it is matched with some success. Never underestimate the power of success in enhancing one's aura, but in a world teeming with compromises and futures whose indecisiveness only creates more disorder, one clear-minded soul will be a magnet of attention, will have charisma. One-on-one or in a jury capable of the revolution, Lenin had little or no charisma. His countenance was attractive, but many found his strident manner irritating. He won charisma when he was seen as the man who could save the country. Charisma is not a mysterious quality that inhibits you outside your control. It is an illusion in the eyes of those who see you as having what they lack. Particularly in times of trouble, you can enhance that illusion through calmness, resolution, and clear-minded practicality. It also has to have a seductively simple message. Call it the savior syndrome. Once people imagine you can save them from chaos, they will fall in love with you, like a person who melts in the arms of his or her rescuer. And mass love equals charisma. How else to explain the love ordinary Russians fell for a man as emotionless and unexciting as Vladimir Lenin, the guru? According to the beliefs, according to the beliefs of the Theosophical Society, every 2000 years or so, the spirit of the world teachers, Lord Maitri, inhabits the body of a human. First there was a Sri Krishna, born 2000 years before Christ. Then there was a Jesus himself, and at the start of the 20th century, another incarnation was due. Born in 1909, the Theosophist Charles later saw a boy and an Indian beach and had an epiphany. This 14-year-old led Jiddu Krishnamurti would be the world teacher's next vehicle. Later, Peter was struck by the simplicity of the boy, who seemed to lack the high slightest traces of selfishness. The members of the Theosophical Society agreed with this assessment and adopted this category undefined unnerved youth, whose teachers had repeatedly beaten him for stupidity. They fed and clothed him and began spiritual instruction. The scurvy urchin turned into a devilishly handsome young man. In 1911, the Theosophists formed the Order of the Star in the East, a group indeed that prepared the way for coming of the world teacher. Krishnamurti was made head of the order. He was taken to England, where his education continued, and everywhere he went, he was pampered and revered. His air of simplicity and contentment could not help but impress. Soon Krishnamurti began to have visions. In 1922, he declared, "I have drunk at the fountain of joy and eternal beauty. I am God intoxicated." Over the next few years, he had psychic experiences that the Theosophist interprets as visits from the world teacher. But Krishnamurti had actually had a different kind of revelation. The truth of the universe came from within. No God, no Guru, no dogma could ever make one realize it. He himself was no God or Messiah, but just another man. The reverence that he was treated with disgusted him. In 1929, much to his followers' shock, he disbanded the Order of the Star and regained from the Theosophical Society. And so Krishnamurti became a philosopher determined to spread the truth he had discovered. You must be simple, reviewing the screens of language and past experience. Through this means, anyone could attain contentment of the kind that radiates from Krishnamurti. The Theosophists abandoned him, but his following grew larger than ever. In California, where he spent much of his time, the interest in him begged on cultic adoration. The poet Robinson Jeffers said that wherever Krishnamurti entered a room, you could feel a brightness filling the space. The writer Aldous Huxley met him in Los Angeles and fell under his spell. Hearing his book, he wrote, "It was like listening to the discourse of the Buddha. Such powerful intrinsic authority. This man radiates enlightenment." The actor Jonah Barrymore asked him to play the role of a Buddha in a film. Krishnamurti politely declined. When he visited India, hands would reach out from the crowd to try to touch him through the open car window. People prostrated themselves before him. Repulsed by all this adoration, Krishnamurti gave more and more detached. He even talked about himself in the third person. In fact, the ability to disengage from one's past and views the world anew was part of his philosophy. Yet once again, the effect was the opposite of what he expected. The affection and reverence people felt for him only grew. His followers fought jealously for signs of his favor. Women in particular fell deeply in love with him, although he was a lifelong celibate. Krishnamurti had no desire to be a guru or charismatic, but he inadvertently discovered a law of human psychology that disturbed him. People do not want to hear that your power comes from years of effort or discipline. They prefer to think that it comes from a personality, your character, something you were born with. They also have that proximity to the guru or charismatic will make some of that power rub off on them. They did not want to read Krishnamurti's books or to spend years practicing his lessons. They simply wanted to be near him, soak up his aura and hear him speak, feel the light that entered the room with him. Krishnamurti advocated simplicity as a way of opening up to the truth, but his own simplicity just allowed people to see him, but they wanted him, attributing powers to him that he not only denied but ridiculed. This is the Guru effect. And it is surprisingly simple. The aura you are after is not the fiery one of the charismatics, but one of incandescent enlightenment. An enlightened person has understood something that makes him or her content, and this contentment radiates outward. This is the appearance you want. You do not need anything or anyone. You are fulfilled. People are naturally drawn to those who emit happiness. Maybe they can catch it from you. The less obvious you are, the better. Let people conclude that you are happy rather than hearing it from you. Let them see it in your unhurried manner, your gentle smile, your ease and comfort. Keep your words vague, letting people imagine what they will remember. Being aloof and distant only simulates the effect. People will fight for the slightest sense of interest. A guru is content and detached, a deadly charismatic combination. The drama saint. It began on the radio throughout the late 1930s and 1940s and early 1940s. Argentina women Argentina women would hear the plaintive musical voice of Eve Doherty in one of the lavishly produced soap operas that were so popular at the time. She never made you laugh, but how often she could make you cry with the complaints of a betrayed lover, or the last words of Marie Antoinette. The very thought of her voice made you shiver with emotion, and she was pretty with her with flowing blonde hair and her serious face, which was often on the covers of the gossip magazines. In 1943, those magazines published the most exciting story. Eva had begun an affair with one of the most dashing men in the New Melody government, Colonel Juan Perón. Now Argentina's hard year doing propaganda spots for the government, heading the new Argentina that's glisten in the future. And finally, this fairy tale story reached its perfect conclusion in 1945. Juan and Eva married, and the following year, the handsome colonel, after many trials and tribulations, including a spell in his prison from which he was freed by the efforts of his devoted wife, was elected president. He was the chairman of the Descamiscados, the swordless ones, the workers and the poor, just as his wife was only 26 at the time. She had grown up in poverty herself. Now that this star was the first lady of the republic, she seemed to change. She lost weight. Most definitely, her outfits became less flamboyant, even downright austere, and that beautiful flowing hair was now pulled back rather severely. It was a shame the young star had grown up. But as Argentina saw more of the new Evita, as she was now known, her new look affected them more strongly. It was the look of a gently, serious woman, one who was indeed what her husband called the bridge of love between himself and his people. She was now on the radio all the time, and listening to her was emotional as ever, but she also spoke magnificently in public. Her voice was lower and her delivery sour. She stabbed the air with her fingers, reached out as if to touch the audience, and her words pierce you to the core. I left my dreams by the wayside in order to watch over the dreams of others. I now place my soul at the side of the soul of my people. I offer them all my energies so that my body may be a bridge erected towards the happiness of all, pass over it, towards the supreme destiny of the new fatherland. It was no longer only through magazines and the radio that Evita made herself felt. Almost everyone was personally touched by her in some ways. Everyone seemed to know someone who had met her or who had visited her in her office, where a line of supplicants would its way through the hallway to the door behind her desk. She sat so calm and full of love. Feeling Grace recorded her acts of clarity to a woman who had lost everything. Evita would give a house to one with a sick child, free care in the finest hospital. She worked so hard, no wonder rumors had it that she was ill. She was ill, and everyone heard of her visits to the shanty towns and to hospitals for the poor, where against the wishes of her staff, she would kiss people with all kinds of maladies, leper, syphilistic men, etc. on the cheek. Once an assistant applied by this habit tried to dab Evita's lips with alcohol to sterilize them. The saint of a woman grabbed the bottle and smashed it against the wall. Yes, Evita was a saint, a living Madonna. Her appearance alone could heal the sick, and when she died of cancer in 1952, no outside or to Argentina could possibly understand the sense of grief and loss she felt behind. For some, the country never recovered. The country never recovered. Most of us live in a somnambulistic state. We do our daily task and the daily flyby. The two exceptions to this are childhood and those moments when we are in love. In both cases, our emotions are more engaged, more open and active, and we equate feeling emotional with feeling more alive. A public figure who can affect people's emotions, who can make them feel communal, feeling sadness, joy, or hope as a similar fact. An appeal to them emotions is far more powerful than an appeal to reason. Eva Perón knew this power early on. As a radio actress, her tremulous voice could make audiences weep. Because of this, people saw in her great charisma. She never forgot the experience. Every public act was framed in dramatic and religious motives. Drama is considered emotion, and the Catholic religion is a force that reaches into your childhood, hits you where you cannot help yourself. Evita's uplifted arms, her stage acts of charity, her sacrifices for the common folk, all this went straight to her heart. It was not her goodness alone that was charismatic. Although the appearance of goodness is alluring enough, it was her ability to dramatize her goodness. You must learn to express the two great purveyors of emotion, drama and religion. Drama cuts out the useless and banal in life, focusing on moments of beauty and terror. Religious deals with matters of life and death, make you charitable actions dramatic, give your loving words. Religious import, bathe every in ritual and myth, going back to childhood, garden in the emotions you store. You people will see over your head to the halo of charisma. Halo of charisma. Halo of charisma. Halo of charisma. The Deliverer. The Deliverer. In Harlem in the early 1950s, a few African Americans knew much about the Nation of Islam or ever stepped into its temple. The nation preached that white people were descended from the devil and that someday Allah would liberate the black race. The doctrine had little meaning for Harlemites who went to church for spiritual solace and turned in practical matters to their local traditions. But in 1954, a new minister for the Nation of Islam arrived in Harlem. The minister's name was Malcolm X, and he was well-read and eloquent. Yet his gestures and words were angry. Word spread. White settled in Malcolm's father. He had grown up in a juvenile facility, then had survived as a small-time hustler before being arrested for burglary and spending 6 years in prison. His short life, he was only 29 at the time, had been one long run-in with the law. Yet look at him now, so confident and educated. No one had helped him. He had done it all on his own. Harlemites began to see Malcolm X everywhere, handing out flyers addressing the young. He would stand outside their churches as the congregation dispersed, he would point to the preacher and say, he represents the white man's God, I represent the black man's God. The curious began to come to hear him preach at the Nation of Islam temple. He would ask them to look at the actual condition of their lives. When you get through looking at where you live, then take a walk across Central Park, he would tell them. Look at the white man's apartment, look at his Wall Street. His words were powerful, particularly coming from a minister. In 1957, a young Muslim in Harlem witnessed the beating of a drunken black man by several policemen. When the Muslim protested, the police pummeled him senseless and carted him off to jail. An angry crowd gathered outside the police station, ready to riot, told that only Malcolm X could forestall violence. The police commissioner brought him in and told him to break up the mob. Malcolm refused, speaking more temperately. The commissioner begged him to reconsider. Malcolm calmly set conditions for his cooperation, medical care for the beaten Muslim, and proper punishment for the police officers. The commissioner reluctantly agreed. Outside the station, Malcolm explained the agreement, and the crowd dispersed in Harlem and around the country. He was an overnight hero, finally a man who took action. Membership in his temple soared. Malcolm began to speak all over the United States. He never read from a taxi. Looking out at the audience, he made eye contact, pointed his fingers. His anger was obvious, not so much in his tone. He was always controlled and articulate, and his fierce energy, the veins pumping out on his neck. Many earlier black leaders had used cautious words and had asked their followers to deal patiently and politely with their social lot, no matter how unfair. What a relief Malcolm was. He ridiculed the racists, he ridiculed the liberals, he ridiculed the president. No white person escaped his scorn. If whites were violent, Malcolm said, the language of violence should be spoken back to them, for it was the only language they understood. Hustle is good, he cried out. It's been bottled up too long. In response to the growing popularity of the non-violent leader, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm said, anybody can sit, an old woman can sit, a crowd can sit, it takes a man to stand. Malcolm X had a bracing effect on many who felt the same anger he did, but were frightened to express it. At his funeral, he was assassinated in 1965. At one of his speeches, the actor Ossie Davis delivered the eulogy before a large immersive crowd. Malcolm, he said, was our own black shining prince. Malcolm X was a charismatic of Moses' kind. He was a deliverer. The power of this sort of charismatic comes from his or her expression of dark emotions that have built up over years of oppression. In doing so, the deliverer provides an opportunity of the release of bottled up emotions by other people, of the hostility matched by forced politeness and smiles. Deliverers have to be one of the suffering crowd, only more so. Their pain must be exemplary. Malcolm's personal history was an integral part of his charisma. His lesson that blacks should have themselves, not wait for whites to lift them up, meant a great deal more because of his own years in prison and because he had followed his own doctrine by educating himself, lifting himself up From the bottom, the deliverers must be a living example of personal redemption. The essence of charisma is an overpowering emotion that communicates itself in your gestures, in your tone of voice, in subtle signs that are the more powerful for being spoken. You feel something more deeply than others, and no emotion is more powerful than more capable of creating a charismatic reaction than hatred, particularly if it comes from deep-rooted feelings of oppression expressed what others are afraid to express, and they will see great powers in you. Great power in you. Say what they want to say but cannot. Never be afraid of going too far. If you represent a release from oppression, you have the leeway to go still farther. Moses spoke of violence, of destroying every last one of his enemies. Language like this brings the oppressed together and makes them feel more alive. This is not, however, something that is uncontrollable on your part. Malcolm X felt this from early on, but only in prison did he teach himself the art of oratory and how to channel his emotions. Nothing is more charismatic than the sense that someone is struggling with great emotion rather than simply giving into it. The Olympian actor. On January 24, 1960, an insurrection broke out in Algeria, then still a French colony, led by right-wing French soldiers. Its purpose was to foretell Its purpose was to foretell the proposal of President Charles de Gaulle to grant Algeria the right of self-determination. If necessary, the insurrectionists would take over Algeria in the name of France. For several tense days, the 70-year-old de Gaulle maintained a strange silence. Then on January 9, at 8 in the evening, he appeared on French national television. Before he had uttered a word, the audience was astonished, for he wore his old uniform from World War II, a uniform that everyone recognized that created a strong emotional response. De Gaulle had been the hero of the resistance, the savior of the country at its darkest moments, but that uniform had not been seen for quite some time. The de Gaulle spoke, reminding his public in his cool and confident manner of all they had accomplished together in liberating France from the Germans. Slowly, he moved from these charged patriotic issues to the rebellion in Algeria and the affront presented to the spirit of the liberations. He finished his address by repeating his famous words of June 18, 1940. Once again, I call all Frenchmen, whatever they are, to reunite with France. Viva la République, viva la France. The speech had two purposes. It showed that de Gaulle was determined not to give an inch to the rebels, and it reached for the heart of all patriotic Frenchmen, particularly in the army. The insurrection quickly died, and no one doubted the connection between its failure and the de Gaulle's performance on television. The following year, the French voted overwhelmingly in favor of Algerian self-determination. On April 11, 1961, de Gaulle gave a press conference in which he made it clear that France would soon grant the country full independence. 11 days later, French generals in Algeria issued a communique stating that they had taken over the country and declaring a state of siege. This was the most dangerous moment of all. Faced with Algeria's imminent independence, these right-wing generals would go all the way. A civil war could break out, toppling the Gaulle's government. The following night, de Gaulle appeared once again on television. Once again, wearing his old uniform, he mocked the journalists, comparing them to a South American junta. He talked calmly and sternly. Then suddenly, at the very end of the address, his voice rose and even trembled as he called out to the audience, Francis, a des moi. French women, French men, help me. It was the most stirring moments of all. His television appearances. French soldiers in Algeria, listening on transistor radios, were overwhelmed. The next day, they held a mass demonstration in favor of de Gaulle. 2 days later, the general surrendered. On July 1, 1962, de Gaulle proclaimed Algeria's independence. In 1941, after the German invasion of France, de Gaulle escaped to England to recruit an army that would eventually return to France for the liberations. At the beginning, he was alone and his mission seemed hopeless, but he had the support of Winston Churchill, and with Churchill's blessings he gave a series of radio talks that the BBC broadcast to France. His strange hypnotic voice with its dramatic tremulous would rather friends in living rooms in In the evenings, few of his listeners even knew what he looked like, but his tone was so confident and so stunning that he recruited a silent army of believers. In person, De Gaulle was a strange, bored, and brooding man whose confident manner could just as easily irritate as been over. But over the radio, that voice had intense charisma. De Gaulle was the first great master of modern media, for he easily transferred his dramatic skills to television, where his iciness, his calmness, his total self-possession made audiences feel both comforted and inspired. The world has grown more fractured, and nation no longer comes together on the streets or in the squares. It is brought together in living rooms where people watching television all over the country can simultaneously be alone and with others. Charisma must now be communicable over the airwaves, or it has no power, but it is in some ways easier to project on television, both because television makes a direct one-on appeal, the charismatic seems to address you, and because charisma is fairly easy to fake for the few moments you spend in front of the camera. As De Gaulle understood when appearing on television, it is best to radiate calmness and control, to use dramatic effects sparingly. De Gaulle's overall iciness made doubly effective the brief moment in which he raised his voice or let loose a biting joke by remaining calm and underpinning it. He hypnotized his audience. Your face can express much more if your voice is less strident. He conveyed emotion visually, the uniform, the setting, and through the use of certain charged words. The liberation Joan of Arc, the less he strained for effect, the more sincere he appeared. All this must be carefully orchestrated. Punctuate your calmness with surprise, rise to a climax, keep things short and terse. The only thing that cannot be faked is self-confidence. The key component to charisma since the days of Moses should be the camera. Let's betray your insecurity. All the tricks in the world will not put your charisma back together again. Symbol, the lamp. Invisible to the eye, a current flowing through a wire in a glass vessel generates a heat that turns into incandescence. All we can see is the glow. In the prevailing darkness, the lamp lights the way. Dangers. On a pleasant May day in 1794, the citizens of Paris gathered in a park for the festival of the Supreme Being. The focus of their attention was Maximal de Robespierre, head of the Committee of the Public Safety, and the men who had thought of the festival in the first place. The idea was simple: to combat atheism, to recognize the existence of a Supreme Being and the immortality of the soul as the guiding forces of nature. It was Robespierre's day of triumph. Standing before the masses in his sky blue suit and white stockings, he initiated the festivities. The crowd all adored him. After all, he had safeguarded the purpose of the French Revolution throughout the intense politicking that had followed it. The year before, he had initiated the Reign of Terror, which cleansed the revolution of its enemies by sending them to the guillotine. He had also helped guide the country through a war against the Austrians and the Prussians. What made crowds, and particularly women, love him was his incorruptible virtue. He lived very modestly. His refusal to compromise the passion for the revolution that was evident in everything he did, and the romantic language of his speeches, which could not fail to inspire. He was God. The day was beautiful and argued a great future for the revolution. 2 months later, in July 26, Robespierre delivered a speech that he thought would ensure his place in history, for he intended to hint at the end of the terror and a new era for France. Rivard also added that he was to call for a last handful of people to be sent to the guillotine, a final group that threatened the safety of the revolution. Morning the Rostrum to address the country's governing convention. Robespierre wore the same clothes he had worn on the day of festival. The speech was long, almost 3 hours, and included an impassioned discussion of the values and virtues he had helped protect. There was also talk of conspiracies, treachery, unnamed enemies. The response was enthusiastic but a little less so than usual. The speech had tired many representatives. Then a lone voice was heard, that of a man named Burden, who spoke against printing Robespierre's speech, a veiled sign of disapproval. Certainly others stood up on all sides and accused him of vagueness. He had talked of conspiracies and threats without naming the guilty. As to the specific, he refused, preferring to name names. Later on, the next Robespierre stood to defend his speech, and the representatives shouted him down. A few hours later, he was the one He was the one sent to the guillotine on July 30th amid a gathering of citizens who seemed to be in an even more festive mood than at the festival of the Supreme Being. Raspberries had fell into the basket to resounding cheers to the reign of terror was over. Many of those who seemed to admire Raspberries actually harbored a knowing resentment of him. He was so virtuous, so superior, it was oppressive. Some of these men had plotted against him and were waiting for the slightest sign of weakness, which appeared on that fateful day when he gave his last speech, refusing to name his enemies. He had shown either a desire to end the bloodshed or a fear that they would strike at him before he could have them killed. Fed by the conspirators, this one spark turned into fire within 2 days. First a governing body and then a nation turned against charismatic who 2 months before had been revered. Charisma is as volatile as the emotion it stirs. Most often it stirs sentiments of love, but such feelings are hard to maintain. Psychologists talk of erotic fatigue. The moments after love in which you feel tired of it. Resentful reality creeps in. Love turns to hate. Erotic fatigue is a threat to all charismatics. The charismatic often wins love by acting the savior, rescuing people from some trivial circumstances, but once they feel secure, charisma is less seductive to them. Charismatics need danger and risk. They are not plotting bureaucrats. Some of them desperately keep danger going, as the De Gaulle and Kennedy were want to do, or as desperately did through the reign of terror. But despite tired of this, and at your first sign of weaknesses, they turn on you. They love you. Their love they showed before will be matched by their hatred now. Hatred of you. The only defense is to master your charisma. Your passion, your anger, your confidence make you charismatic. But too much charisma for too long creates fatigue and a desire for calmness and order. The better kind of charisma is created consciously and is kept under control. When you need to, you can. When you need to, you can glow with confidence and fervor, inspiring the masses, and when the adventure is over, you can settle into a routine, turning the heat not out but down. Raspberry may have been planning that more, but it came a day too late. People will admire your self-control and adaptability. Their love affair with you will move closer to the habitual affection of a man and a wife. You will even have the leeway to look a little boring, a little simple, a role that can also seem charismatic if played correctly. Remember, charisma depends on success, and the best way to maintain success after the initial charismatic rush is to be practically even cautious. Mao Zedong was a distant, enigmatic man who, for many, had an awe-inspiring awe-inspiring charisma. Mao Zedong was a distant, enigmatic man who for many had an awe-inspiring charisma. He suffered many setbacks that would have spelled the end of a less clever man, but after such reversal he retreated, becoming practical, tolerant, flexible at least for a while. This protected him from the danger of a counter-reaction. There is another alternative: to play the armed prophet according to Machiavelli. Although a prophet may acquire power through his charismatic personality, he cannot long survive without the strength to back it up. He needs an army. The masses will tire of him. They will need to be forced. Being an armed prophet may not literally involve arms, but it demands a forceful side to the character which you can back up with action. Unfortunately, this means being merciless with your enemies for as long as you can attain power, and no one creates more bitter enemies than the charismatic. Finally, there is nothing more dangerous than succeeding charismatic. These characters are unconventional, and their rule is personal in style. Being stamped with the wildness of their personalities, they often leave chaos in their way. The one who fell after charismatic is left with a mess which the people, however, do not see. They miss their inspirer and blame the successor over the situation at all costs. If it is unavoidable, do not try to continue what the charismatic started. Go in a new direction by being practical, trustworthy, and plain-seeking. You can often generate a strange kind of charisma through contrast. That was how Harry Truman not only survived the legacy of Roosevelt but established his own type of charisma. Okay. today we'll be reading the star. Okay. Okay. So that's it for today. Let's see you tomorrow. Bye. Bye. Okay.